The TTC public meeting will begin shortly.
Yep. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting, the Audit Risk Management Committee meeting, to order. We'll start by reading the land acknowledgement. Chrisanne, could I ask you to do that, please?
Thank you, Chair. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Thank you, Chrisanne. I'll now ask if any members have any conflict of interest according to the what is it? The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Julie? No? Benton, no? Okay, that's good. So first item is the approval of the minutes. Anyone have any comments before we approve those? Julie or Fenton? No? So will you move them? And Fenton, you're in favor? That's approved. Okay, we are now going to, well, I want to remind you that this meeting is live. We're on TTC YouTube channel. We will be going in camera at some point for a couple of in-camera items, but other than that, we will be in the public domain. All of our committee members are here, so we don't have any of the issues with moving motions, etc. Now we're planning to change the order paper. Has that been circulated to the committee in advance as well? No. Okay. Well, what I'm proposing is that we start with the KPMG audit plan, and that would allow them to then do their work with us and then leave. Then we will go to the internal audit items, which are relatively quick, I think. The audit plan status update, and then the 24 audit plan. And then we'll go into the audits that were conducted by the Auditor General as items number 4 and 5, and we'll have our training session at the end, since that's just involves the committee members. So if that's satisfactory, do I need a motion to approve that? Fenton, will you move that? And are you in favor, Julie? Okay, that's approved. So given that, I think we move to the new item 1, which is KPMG's audit plan for this fiscal year. And Kevin, do we have you on the system?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Okay, there, I see you. Okay, why don't you go ahead or assign to your team as appropriate, Kevin?
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Our material in terms of the planning report itself, we're going to walk through the deck at a very high level. We're not intending on doing a page by page, but should Sal share his screen, or will someone bring it up on the screen, or should we just see and refer to the pages as necessary?
Why don't you share it? Chrisanne will give you that capability.
Okay, I'm going to ask Sal, Senior Manager, to do that. Sal? Thanks. Well, good morning, everyone. I'll start off by, again, introducing myself. My name is Kevin Travers. I'm the lead audit partner for the TTC Audit. I am joined this morning by Sal Del Mastro. He's a senior manager on the audit. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the first of 2 formal communications that we'll have with this group. The second will be when the audit is complete. We'll be back before you to report the findings of the audit itself. We are going to hit, again, what I consider to be the highlights, not do page by page. We'll start on the audit highlights slide, please, Sal. So this provides a little bit of a framing of what our conversation is going to look like this morning and the items that we're going to hit. The audit itself will be encompassing not only the audit of TTC, but also we will have a separate audit opinion with respect to the Toronto Transit Commission Insurance Company. This planning report will refer to that audit as well, too. Our plan will speak to materiality as it's determined. We've used the same methodology as used in prior years. So as a result, the change in the numbers are due solely to the change in the underlying values that drive the materiality calculation. We'll also speak to the involvement of others. So as part of the audit itself, we make use of other specialists in performing our procedures, including IT specialists and actuarial specialists as well, too. We'll speak to the fraud risks as determined. And these are not fraud risks that are particularly specific to TTC. These are required or presumptive fraud risks. So whenever we're performing a financial statement audit, we're required to presume that the identified fraud risks are in existence. We are then required to perform procedures to sufficiently mitigate those risks to an acceptably low level. And we'll also speak to the areas of audit focus throughout the planned audits itself. Sal, if we could move to the next slide, please.
Yep.
Thanks. So this slide speaks only to the use of the technology that we use at KPMG in performing our audits. It's very similar to the approach that we took in prior years. We continue to make investment in technology to get greater benefit of the use of those items. Let's move to the materiality slide. Sal, do you want to speak to materiality?
Yep, sure. Okay, thanks, Kevin. So over the next few slides, I'll be discussing materiality. So this slide here is more for informational purposes, and it highlights how materiality is used in our audit. So specifically how we use it to plan and perform the audit, as well as evaluate the effect of misstatements found. On the next slide, we'll discuss the actual calculation for the 2023 audits. Okay, so materiality for this year's audit will be $60 million for TTC and $2.6 million for TTC Insurance Company. For TTC, materiality is determined based on 2% of the benchmark, which is the estimated total expenses from continuing operations. For TTC Insurance Company, materiality is based on 2% of the estimated total assets, which is determined to be $2.6 million. So the benchmark and percentages are consistent with that of the 2022 audit. And we just want to caveat that this is the planned materiality. So once year end begins and we get the actual results, we'll recalculate materiality. And if it's significantly different, we'll update materiality, communicate that with management, and then that will also be communicated in the audit findings report later on in 2024. Okay, so the next slide is on involvement of others, specifically involvement of KPMG specialists within the audit. So we use specialists to help us with our audit. We use an actuarial specialist to assist with the review of complex estimates. So they assist us with the evaluation of the employee future benefits liabilities, as well as the unsettled accident claims liabilities. We also use the IT audit specialist to obtain an understanding of the IT environment and to evaluate the general and application IT controls. So overall, the use of the specialist for the 2023's audit is consistent with that of 2022. Moving on to the next slide, it's the updates to our prior year audit plan. In terms of significant risks, there have been no changes from prior year. However, there is one new public sector accounting standard that is applicable for this year, and that is PS 3280, which is the asset retirement obligations. So Appendix D of this report provides more information on this. And there are also some other new accounting standards that are going to be applicable and will be implemented in future years. And those are also detailed in the appendices as well. Okay, so risk assessment summary. This slide is very similar to what was presented in prior year. It discloses what our risk of frauds are for the audit, as well as risk of errors on the material financial statement captions. The only change to this slide that you'll see is there's the addition of the asset retirement obligation, which is the new item for 2023's audit. So moving on to the significant risk, the first significant risk is the risk of fraud due to management overriding controls. Now, this is a presumed risk for the Canadian auditing standards. And I just want to mention it's not a risk that's specific to TTC. It is required to be a presumed risk for all our audits at KPMG. So this is a risk because management is in a unique position to determine estimates, exercise judgment, and post journal entries. Therefore, there is the opportunity to commit fraud. So we are required to design and perform various procedures as a response to this risk. And some of those procedures include testing of journal entries, review of estimates determined by management, and also evaluating any significant unusual transactions. The next significant risk is the risk of fraud due to fraudulent revenue recognition. This is also prescribed fraud risk for the Canadian auditing standards. And again, it's not specific to TTC, but it is considered presumed risk, and therefore we must perform procedures to address it. So accordingly, we incorporate various procedures into our audit plan to address this risk, such as journal entry testing of revenue entries matching our predetermined high-risk criteria. We also test revenue cutoff procedures, including the review of completeness of deferred revenue balances, amongst other procedures that are listed on this slide. Okay, moving on to other areas of focus. So the next section of the report, there's a lot of detail over the next 4 or 5 slides. I'm not going to go into detail on each of the captions, but at a high level, these are the areas where we spend the majority of our time on for the audit. So in each of the sections, we have provided some examples of the procedures that we perform in order to obtain audit evidence over these captions. And the majority of these procedures are listed are consistent with that of previous year. I just want to mention that obviously the new one is the asset retirement obligation. So this is a new section for the 2023 audit planning report. And then next, I'll pass it back to Kevin to discuss the key milestones and deliverables and to go over the remainder of the presentation.
Thanks, Sal, and I'll be brief with the remaining comments. With respect to this particular slide, it just provides an outline of the planned timing for the procedures that we'll have, and between today's date and being back before you in terms of presenting the findings of the audit itself. You will note that the plan is to do the bulk of the audit work associated with the implementation of the new standard as part of the interim work rather than having it at the end of the year. Should also provide additional comfort to the members of the committee that we have worked with management extensively over a period of the last year. TTC has a very strong project group and committee moving forward with this implementation, and we're very satisfied with respect to the progress made to date. If we can move just to the appendices, Sal, and I'll speak just at a high level in terms of the contents, and then we'll pause for any questions. The contents of the appendices are very similar to what you may have seen in the past, so it does include reference to the new standards, as Sal has pointed out. While the asset retirement obligation is a significant lift for the current year financial reporting, we don't expect that the other items that are listed will have a significant impact on the financial statements in the future, but we'll continue to monitor those and to work with management to ensure that if there's any requirement in terms of the implementation, that is done so on a very timely basis. So with that, again, we'll take the appendices as being read, but Sal and I would be very happy to respond to any questions that you have this morning.
Thank you, Kevin. Before I move to questions, Josie, I should ask you if you've got any comments that you have on this item as well.
Thank you and good morning, Chair and members of the committee. No, other than to say we've begun the work in earnest with our partners at KPMG, and I'm proud to say that the team is ready for the new reporting requirements based on the PSAB change. So we're ready to go. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Okay, that's all you need to say, Josie. Okay, any questions of KPMG or our finance staff? Julie? No. Benton, no. Okay, then can I ask you to move approval, which is receipt of this item? That's done, and all in favor? That is approved. Okay, thank you very much, Kevin and Sal and your team. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to your report in a few months.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Okay, next item is the 23 audit plan status update. I'm going to turn that to Viraj, whoever, there you are.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Viraj.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we've got two reports that have come to the RMC today. One is the 2024 ARC IA proposed plan and the 2023 ARC audit plan status update and ERM program update. So we'll start with the 2023 audit plan status update and ERM program update. So far, one project has, out of 6, has been complete. We've got 2 others in the reporting phase, and we've got 3 projects that are in the fieldwork phase currently, with expected completion of fieldwork at the end of this calendar year. We have deferred one project, which is the capital expenditures review, due to adding a fair aviation review mid-year as part of our plan. We also, on top of these 6 projects, we do several advisory projects that are currently underway. Just for some context, it's about 13 projects this year that's either complete or in process of being complete. Nothing that needs to be broadly shared with the group here, but it's just really our way of kind of balancing assurance with advisory to really bring value to management and the organization as a whole. In terms of the completed project, which is the subway maintenance review project, here are a few pertinent points. Overall, our rating has been noted as some improvement is required. This is a good rating. 7 observations have been noted, 1 high, 4 medium, and 2 low. All observations have associated action plans and timelines, and in one of the instances, the action plan has already been completed. Thematically, the observations have to do with one of them, which is coming up, meeting upcoming regulatory requirements, enhancing elements of KPIs, certain updates to standard operating procedures or work instructions that need to either be updated or reviewed, and then keeping kind of the systems updated for work orders that are closed. Those are some of the themes that are part of that exercise. In terms of the ERM update, good progress is being made on, and we're on target to meet our 2023 ERM roadmap and plan. We have completed the framework. It is subject to validation from our external consultants that we are using to help validate this process. We have got our hiring complete for this stream. And we've done a number of activities, whether it's pertaining to the identification of preliminary risks, having some of those discussions with the chiefs and key potential risk owners and select executives as well. We conducted an ERM workshop with our consulting partners late last month to really deal with kind of the scoring mechanism and to validate the top risks to TTC. A training session was also provided to the executive team on kind of the whole process of ERM. And then we'll also be doing performing a training session for the leadership group here for the ARMC today as well. In terms of next steps, we really need to get into kind of the risk management piece as part of the analysis, because we've very much focused on the assessment, which is the identification and kind of the scoring piece, but now it gets into the management side, which is really our next step to focus on and really delve into some of those details. We'll need to also finalize the ERM framework, and then depending on the recommendations that we get as part of our consulting review, to incorporate those as part of our future work as well. So let me stop there, and I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Any questions for Rod?
There we go. Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the timing on the sort of summary document that is the risk identification, the sort of I don't know what you call it, that inventories the risks and the nature of those risks. Because it looks to me like it's around now that it's to be finished, and I'm assuming you wouldn't have put that in there if it wasn't in fact the case. So is there a plan to share that, A, I guess at this level and when, and then B, does this get to the board?
Yeah, short answer is yes, Commissioner Osborne. So we'll get our detailed plans and deliverables at the next ARMC. You will see a snippet of what those risks are as part of the training session that we will be doing today. So you'll get some insight out of it today. But our expectation is for that to kind of hit the ARMC when at the next ARMC meeting, which I anticipate will be around February, March of next year. And what we'll do is, and we'll use that as an opportunity, and I'll open it up to the ARMC members here. If there's some value for us to take it up to the board at the ARMC's discretion, then we're happy to do that as well.
Thank you.
Benton, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lalonde. Faraj, good morning, and thank you for that presentation. What I'm trying to understand from you is what do you define as some improvement, and when does it hit a threshold for improvement that needs to go beyond some, maybe an overhaul, maybe something below that? Because when you read some of the summary results, it's the rail car and shops did not complete a subway car asset management plan. We've not defined technical maintenance and performance metrics as part of our continuous improvement approach. 3,000 plus rocket corrective maintenance work orders have not been analyzed for true completion status or closure. I'm not an operator, but that to me sounds scary.
So let me break it down, Commissioner. The rating criteria is set anywhere from effective, so we've got some improvement, we've got improvement required, significant improvement, and then critical, right? So that is the mechanism. Behind each of those, we do have our own kind of standard operating procedures that actually links up a rough mapping as to, depending on how high, medium, or low in terms of the ratings, if you will, how that would also impact the rating system, right? So in this particular case, the observations, the most critical observation that is on there is really the meeting the regulatory requirement of Regulation 588-17. Right, which is the first and foremost. That one was noted as a high-rated observation, and the reason that it's a high is that we can't necessarily just associate it alone to subway maintenance or rail cars and shops. That is something broader, more organizationally that needs to be done, and management has already taken steps in, and they've hired a head of EAM that's also working with the consulting firm to meet those requirements holistically. This one was identified as a piece that was limited to just subway rail and cars. The other thing I want to kind of highlight is that even though we've kind of identified these observations, whether it is the asset management plan or the KPIs, two examples that you brought up, there are some elements already in play. So for the asset management component, we do already have a summary of assets, the replacement costs, average age of assets. The subway fleet plan, as an example, captures a lot of that useful information. And then the rail cars and shops has also done a number of asset management kind of gap assessments as part of the analysis. Is there more to be done? Yes. But we need to, when we assign the ratings, we need to balance out how severe it is based on any kind of activities that have already been performed. The KPIs, I'll use that as an example as well. The main KPI that's used is a mean distance between failure, which basically captures delays longer than 5 minutes. But there are also other ones which monitor delay incidents, work orders for repeat work orders, things of that nature. But then we also had some suggestions, and there may be certain KPIs that we can use to enhance that even further. So elements such as mean time to repair, labor hours per work order, vehicle uptime, maintenance cost per car, things of that nature. So it's not, so when we look at some of these observations and we come up with a holistic rating, we've got to balance out the mere absence of it versus, can we enhance it, right? So, and I think that's where we pull it together in terms of the rating.
Got it. So based on what you're saying, the logic to me is because there is already some of these plans and activities around it.
They already have some of these already in place, right? So there is some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I could follow up on that question. I see we've got Rich here with us today. Rich, why don't we give you a couple of minutes just to respond to the audit and let us know whether you agree with the findings and how you're approaching the remediation.
Yeah, so thank you. I agree with the audit. I mean, what Viraj said is on the first one, the policy there, that's the regulatory compliance. That's more to do with the entire asset management program that everybody is working on in terms of the policy and what we're going to be doing next. So that's already in play. In terms of the KPIs and the backlog, there's always constantly work on it. I mean, Tara is here from the AG. She's done a lot of work in our bus maintenance area. We've taken a lot of lessons learned from some of those findings there, and we're translating them. We've been translating them over into the rail side of the business as well. So in terms of some of the KPIs that Viraj mentioned, like cost per vehicle and other things like that, we do have that information. It's just not readily available in a KPI package. We do have it. And in terms of the backlog, I think you said 3,000. If you take a look at some of the backlog and the rail side of things, a lot of it is basically work orders in there to monitor things. So they're longstanding items, and we just have them in there just to make sure that they're not forgotten and that we're constantly monitoring some of the things that we find that need that monitoring. If you want me to give you an example, gearbox, you see a wet gearbox. It doesn't mean it's leaking. It just means it's most of the time it's sweating. It's not necessarily leaking. But we put the work order in there just to say, let's monitor that just in case it does, you do start to see a leak over time. But most of the times it's just a sweating gearbox. So things like that. So those things just need cleaning up because they've been in the system for a while. And if, you haven't seen that deficiency over X number of years, then maybe we should be closing them out. So.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Okay, so given that, if there's no more questions, Julie, I'll ask you to approve the motion on this, which is to receive it for information. Yeah, okay. You're in favor, Fenton? That's approved. Okay, still with you, Viraj. We'll go to the 24 plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we're this one's the 2024 internal audit plan. We're bringing it before the RMC a bit earlier relative to last time. So I'd like to get the approvals on this, so this allows us to start our potential assurance reviews pretty much Gen 1. So hence the timing has been adjusted from last time. If you recall, it was brought to the February meeting previously. A number of inputs go into coming up with these projects. It includes discussions with various chiefs and executive directors. We do talk to the external auditors as well. We have discussions with the chair of the RMC as well. And then we generate ideas from external literature as well as kind of internal audits knowledge as part of this whole process. We do have discussions with the AG as well. This year we did it as well to see how best to kind of minimize any overlap. And we did it last year with the HR review as well to make sure that it's kind of a little bit cleaner to that extent. New this year is we implemented a process model to also help generate ideas. Normally we would start with a normative model, which would have those kind of various processes and then assign a risk rating. There wasn't one that was exclusively great for the transit sector, so we had to kind of build that and home grow it. So that was also a feed that was used as part of this exercise. So that will get better as we can proceed on in future and subsequent periods. The one piece that was not necessarily incorporated directly anyway was the ERM as being a direct input into this year. We had some line of sight, so we did look at it in kind of informally, but not in a formal manner as part of it. So with that, we landed with 6 assurance projects, which is similar to last year. Namely, it is the capital expenditure review, which we deferred from 2023, as I mentioned before, and actuarial reserves for claims, hiring, onboarding, and retention for non-operators. That was a management request so that there would be some value there. The passenger intercoms more from a safety side to see, how does that process work when those are at the station. Those are those elements at the stations where you can kind of push it for an emergency or request. We also did receive some input to include an element of IT as part of those discussions with the chair here. So we've included IT general controls as part of that review, and we're in the process of interviewing a director for the IT audit side as well, which is looking promising. And then finally, kind of the elevator maintenance piece. Again, a management request on this one, and we've done a kind of a review on this historically. So it's always good every few years to do a little bit of a repeat to see how the control structures are in place on that. So that's essentially the 6 on the assurance side of the projects. Obviously, it doesn't include any kind of other advisory elements because those are more ad hoc based on management request, nor does it include the ERMA compliance activities. So,
questions? Julie? Benton? Just one question, Raj. Can you give us examples of what kind of things you think you'll be looking at on the IT general control side?
So there's two approaches we can take on that, Commissioner, and we're still noodling through it. One is we can look at kind of access, backups and change controls as an option, and then split that out between kind of the IT environment, the OT environment, or the Presto environment. The other option is to pick one of those elements and then do it for the IT OT environment. So there's a few options in there. We're currently working through. I think it's getting closer, that we may land closer towards the change management piece as it pertains to that. But nothing has been concluded yet. It's still very early days.
I guess one of the things to consider is we're going to be receiving a report from the Auditor General later today that covers some areas of that. So we probably need to consider whether we look at covering different areas when we do our work, or whether we want to do follow-up on some of the things that the Auditor General has found as well. So I guess we'll make you don't anticipate starting this work until later next year?
It'll be kind of, I would say, a mid-year, practically. Yes.
We've got time to figure that out.
Noodle through the details, correct.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we're asking to approve this plan for 2024. Fenton, will you move that? Julie, you're in favor? Yeah. That plan is approved. Okay, next item is the Auditor General's report on the streetcar overhead assets. We have a deputant on this item, so let's move to the deputant before we move into the main item. Alan, you're up.
Okay. Better part of the last 20 years, I've lived in the Roncesvalles streetcar corridor. Slide. Of the three modes at the TTC, I'm most knowledgeable in streetcars and their operation. Slide. I agree with the Auditor General on that how we deal with the streetcar overhead wires needs to improve. Slide. The 204 streetcars cited in this report, only the first 50 were supposed to arrive with trolley pulls. We had the option for the other 154 that we had to exercise. Slide. So even with the streetcar delays from Bombardier, we still weren't ready at the TTC. Next slide. Recommendation 9 in this report requests the Chief Executive Officer install and enable GPS on streetcar overhead operations, non-revenue vehicles. Next slide. I totally agree with this recommendation. I think we should enable GPS on all non-revenue vehicles. Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, I am aware, you should be aware that this is not an easy job. Next slide. We had 3 job posts, posting for 3 employees that closed this morning. That's how bad we're looking for people right now. Next slide, please. This job is the professional equivalent of playing street hockey. Next slide. Get all set up, only to have a streetcar come along and you have to take down all your equipment and move it so the streetcar can get by. Next slide, please. According to this report, the TTC operates most routes from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday to Saturday and from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. on Sundays. Next slide. This is not an entirely accurate statement. Next slide, please. 44%, I had to re-edit that, I apologize, of the routes have Blue Knight streetcars on them. Next slide. An additional 2 of the 9 routes have at least a kilometer of tracks with Blue Knight streetcars on them. So that's 55% of the streetcar routes have at least a degree of 24-hour service on them. Next slide. Only a third of our streetcar routes have service ending at 1 a.m. Next slide. But if we look at the 505 streetcar when it's running, it may leave Dundas West at 1:31 a.m., but it takes 45 to 50 minutes to get to the other end at Broadview Station, another 10 to 15 minutes to get from the station to the streetcar yard. Next slide. So that means on the 505 route, there's only 2:15-ish to 5:45 a.m. where there's no streetcars on those tracks, and that's only from Lansdowne to Broadview. This is a very thin window to get things done efficiently in their 8-hour shift. Next slide, please. This report says 58% of the sample preventative inspections with issues had no corrective maintenance performed. I agree that we need to get much better at doing our paperwork at the TTC. Next slide. But if you've ever been to an emergency room, you know that all emergencies are not emergencies. Next slide, please. Of those 58%, that 58% of sampled preventative inspections, if we had better paperwork, we'd know how to triage, what the triage parameters were that the TTC uses to prioritize its repairs. Next slide. Triage examples could be infrequently used streetcar loop, seldomly used diversion tracks, or route sections that are already scheduled for construction or rail upgrades. Next slide, please. For example of this, Queen streetcar from Queen Bay to Yonge is closed for the next 5 years-ish. Richmond and Adelaide, the diversion tracks won't be done until 2024. So the overhead wires that were flagged and may have been flagged in 2022 may have been triaged to happen during 2023 and 2024 because that section of rail is not in service. Next slide, when we are recording these inspections going forward, we should include triage diagnosis as well in the paperwork. Next slide. The first priorities obviously would be the generating routes, revenue generating routes and their routes. Second priority would be diversion tracks. Finally, the low use streetcar loops. Better paperwork will allow us to better understand how people do the hard work that they do for the TTC. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Alan. Any questions for the Deputant? No? Okay, let's turn to the Auditor General. The floor is yours, Auditor General. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Lalonde, and it's great to see everyone in person and also on hybrid today. We're going to start off by sharing our video on our audit report of the TTC streetcar overhead assets, and it just provides a summary of our key findings. So we'll begin with that, and then we have a presentation with some more detail on the key findings following that.
The TTC's streetcar overhead operations is responsible for the ongoing maintenance and repairs of the overhead contact system that powers the streetcars. Failures to this system can result in service disruptions and delays, as well as risks to public safety. Streetcar overhead operations maintenance program consists of both preventative and reactive maintenance. Preventative maintenance includes inspections and corrective maintenance and repairs before there is a failure or breakdown of the assets. Reactive maintenance consists of emergency maintenance and repairs after there is an unexpected malfunction, failure, or damage to the assets. This audit assessed whether TTC's streetcar overhead operations supports safe and reliable streetcar services. For our first objective to assess streetcar overhead operations maintenance and repair activities, we found that untimely, missed, or incomplete preventative inspections and corrective maintenance work may have contributed to some service delays in 2022. Root cause investigations were not completed for all asset failures and service delays, which is critical to prevent similar asset failures in the future. Streetcar overhead operations did not always meet its preventative inspection annual targets. Corrective maintenance was not always performed or not in a timely manner. When performed, it took an average of 5 weeks to complete. Not performing preventative inspections and corrective maintenance in a timely manner increases the risk of asset failures and service delays. For our second objective to assess the TTC's use of data and technology, we found that streetcar overhead operations is not fully leveraging its enterprise asset and workflow management system, resulting in inefficient, manual, and paper-driven processes. For our third objective to assess the TTC's policies, procedures, and performance reporting, we found the need for TTC to strengthen and formalize its maintenance and inspection manuals and standards. This will help address the variability in how preventative inspections are performed and documented. Implementing the 20 recommendations contained in this report will help the TTC improve the efficiency and effectiveness of its streetcar overhead maintenance program by strengthening their asset and workflow management, leveraging technology and data, and enhancing their policies and procedures. To find out more, visit toronto.ca/audit.
So we now have our presentation And I believe Chris-Anne is going to bring it up on the screen. And while that comes up, I just want to acknowledge and thank my team. So I have Ariane Chan, Assistant Auditor General here, and Claire Pastor, Senior Audit Manager, and they're going to help me with the presentation. And we also have Aditi Patish, Audit Manager, and Elaine Liu, Audit Manager, also assisted us. So a big thank you to my team. They did an excellent job on this audit. And I also want to thank TTC's management and staff for their cooperation and assistance with this audit. So Fort Monaco, Peter Horvat, who's online, Peter Giamonti, Arul Baskar, Clavisa Berberi, and of course, Chris-Anne's always helping us with our committee and board materials, so thank you. And there were many other staff. Those are just a few of them, so thank you so much to all of you. Next slide, please. So we'll start off by going through why this audit matters and remind you of our audit objectives before getting into a bit more detail on our key audit findings, followed by our recommendations and a summary for going forward. Next slide, please. So when we were doing our planning of TTC streetcars, we considered several different areas for our audit scope. And based on our risk assessment, we selected the overhead operations of TTC's infrastructure department for streetcars. An effective streetcar overhead maintenance and repair program plays a vital role in preventing and addressing unexpected asset failures and service disruptions and delays. And in turn, it also helps to minimize public safety risk from exposure to the 600 volts of direct current live wires that make up the electrical overhead contact system that powers the streetcars. Also, just to note that we may examine other areas of TTC streetcars in the future. So for our 2024 work plan, we've got an audit planned on TTC workforce planning and management, which will include streetcar operators, and we plan to start that audit in early 2024. So you can never get enough of us, right? Next slide, please. This audit aimed to answer the following questions to assess whether TTC streetcar overhead operations support safe and reliable streetcar operations. So the first objective is on the maintenance and repair activities, the second on leveraging data and technology, and the third around policies, procedures, and KPIs. Next slide, please. We'll now go through our key audit findings and recommendations, which we've grouped into these 5 categories. A is minimizing the risk of asset failures through effective preventative inspections, corrective maintenance, and investigations. B, perform and document preventative inspections in a consistent manner. C, strengthen corrective maintenance and repairs. D, leveraging technology to further improve streetcar overhead operations. And the last one is E, enhancing data collection and performance reporting. I'm now going to pass it over to Claire to walk through some of our detailed examples for Section A.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General. Next slide, please. For this first section of our key audit findings, we found that untimely, missed, and incomplete preventative inspections and corrective maintenance work may have contributed to some service delays in 2022. I'll go through 3 examples to illustrate the impact and importance of preventative inspections and corrective maintenance. The first example shows the importance of timely preventative inspections. On January 14, 2022, a service delay occurred at King Street West and Shaw Street. The delay was due to a worn contact wire and a worn frog, which is a hardware component that allows the streetcar to travel seamlessly through connecting and diverging wires. According to the maintenance schedule, the preventative inspection of this intersection and the assets that failed should be completed once a year. However, there was no inspection performed in 2021. This missed inspection in 2021 contributed to the service delay because if conducted, the inspection could have identified the worn assets before they failed. Next slide, please. The second example shows the importance of performing complete preventative inspections. For context before getting into the details, when performing an inspection, crews use a job plan that identify which assets and what aspects of the assets need to be inspected and reported on. On December 30th, 2022, a service delay occurred at Dundas Street West and Lansdowne Avenue due to a fire to the roof of the streetcar. There were multiple root causes of this incident, with one of the contributing factors being a failure in the cotter pin, which is a metal fastener used to assemble the overhead contact system. Further investigation into the root cause determined that the preventative inspection job plans did not specifically include inspecting the cotter pins and therefore were not being inspected. Overhead operations indicated they will be adding an inspection of the cotter pins to the preventative inspection job plans. This example illustrates the importance for job plans to be complete and accurate. Next slide, please. The third example shows the importance of timely corrective maintenance. On August 18th, 2022, there was a service delay at Queen Street East and Church Street. The emergency crew found a defect in one of the combined frog and glider combination units, which again is a component that allows the streetcar to travel through connecting or diverging wires. About 10 weeks prior to this incident on June 10th, there was a preventative inspection where crews reported and recorded problems with the same asset. However, the corrective maintenance work order was created on June 14th for this issue. However, the work order was still outstanding over 2 months later at the time of the service delay. If the corrective maintenance work order was prioritized and completed in a timely manner, the service delay likely could have been prevented. I'll now pass it over to Ariane to discuss the next two areas of our findings.
Thank you, Claire. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So thank you, Claire. This next section relates to preventative inspection activities. Our audit found that the annual preventative inspection targets were not met for 48% of the assets we sampled. For example, an intersection that had an annual target of 2 inspections, but only 1 inspection was performed in 2022. In addition, preventative inspections should be scheduled and completed at specified time intervals in order to optimize the effectiveness of the inspections and the use of time and resources. What this means is that if an asset has an annual target of 2 inspections per year, they should be performed every 6 months. However, our audit found that inspections were not completed at the specified time intervals. For example, one asset should have inspections every 3 months, but we found that 2 of the inspections were performed just 26 days apart. Next slide, please. We also noted variability in the performance and documentation of preventative inspections. For example, shown here are 2 inspections for the same asset performed 16 days apart on March 2nd and March 18th. First, the green box and arrows outline one variability that we noted regarding how crews perform overhead wire measurements. The inspection on the left on March 2nd shows that the wire measurement was taken from under the wire fitting at 5.5 mm, while the inspection on the right, just 16 days later, shows that the entire wire was measured at 12 mm. Then the blue box and arrows illustrate a second inconsistency in the documented observations and measurements. The crew on March 2nd recorded the measurement for the activity task number 50 on the job plan, while the crew on March 18 left this activity task blank. This inconsistency makes it difficult for TTC to use the inspection results to perform meaningful data and trend analysis, and to monitor the condition of the assets. Next slide, please. This section outlines how corrective maintenance and repairs can be strengthened. We found that there was a lack of policy, procedures, and criteria for identifying and prioritizing corrective maintenance and repairs. From our testing, we found that 58% of sampled inspections with issues identified did not have corrective maintenance performed. For example, this slide shows an extract of the November 2022 preventative inspection for a specific diode asset. However, through our review of the paper corrective maintenance work orders, as well as the maximal system records, we did not find any record of corrective maintenance work performed to address the issues noted in the November 2022 preventive inspection. The only work order record after this inspection was another preventive inspection in May 2023. Next slide, please. We also noted that when corrective maintenance was performed, the average time to complete the work was 5 weeks. after the issue was identified through preventive inspections. The two tables on this slide shows the results of our testing to assess the timeliness of the corrective maintenance process. Our audit found that it took an average of 2 weeks for the corrective maintenance work order to be generated after the inspection was completed. And then on average, it took another 3 weeks between when the corrective maintenance work order was generated and when the work was completed. I will now pass it back to Madame Auditor General to discuss the next two areas of our key findings.
Thank you, Ariane. Next slide, please. So this section of our key audit findings relates to the use of technology. Currently, overhead operations is underutilizing Maximo, an asset and workflow management system implemented by the TTC in the early 2000s. This has resulted in a primarily manual and paper-driven process. As shown on this slide, Maximo's capabilities will not only reduce inefficient manual processes, but also improve the monitoring of work orders, and we've mentioned the issues that we found in that, and facilitate data collection and analytics that will support TTC's continuous improvement initiatives. Next slide, please. This slide shows the current manual process. And as you can likely see, one of the benefits from leveraging technology and automating this process will be efficiencies through automating this process. Next slide, please. This final section of our key findings is about enhancing overhead operations data collection and performance reporting by adding more outcome-focused KPI metrics that assess the timeliness and quality of the maintenance and repair services. As previously mentioned, since we found inspection targets are not always met, as well as the timeliness concerns for corrective maintenance, KPIs that monitor the timeliness of maintenance and repair activities would be useful for management. We also noted recurring, corrective, and emergency maintenance work for the same asset. Therefore, KPIs that monitor the quality of maintenance and repairs would also be helpful. Lastly, both KPIs and their targets should be clearly defined and be supported by accurate and complete data. For example, during our audit, we were unable to reconcile the reported number of preventative inspections, corrective maintenance, and emergency maintenance work orders back to the paper records of these activities. And that's noted in the scope limitation or methodology. It's important that the KPIs be supported with accurate and complete data when management is making decisions based on these KPIs and trends. Next slide, please. So we have made 20 recommendations in our report, and management has agreed to all of our recommendations with their management response included in our report. And I understand that they have a presentation following ours on this. So implementing those recommendations will help the TTC to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of its streetcar overhead maintenance and repair program by strengthening their asset and workflow management, leveraging technology and data, and enhancing their policies and procedures. Next slide, please. So in these next two slides, I've summarized our key recommendations for going forward. And you've noted that we have several recommendations on leveraging technology. I just want to note that I realize planning and implementing an IT system takes a longer period of time, but I also want to point out that there are several important recommendations that, from my point of view, should be addressed in the short to medium term and can be done prior to updating the technology. And I've captured those areas on the slide. So those are updating and formalizing the manual policies and procedures and providing training and oversight to staff. Secondly, strengthening the controls to improve the planning, scheduling, and tracking of the preventative inspections and corrective maintenance and repairs. Third, collecting data and performing root cause analysis and investigations of all asset failures and service delays. And lastly, improving the KPIs to be outcome focused, supported by complete and accurate data. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the key recommendations related to leveraging the Maximo IT system. And as you can see, I've pointed out that some of the recommendations can still be done in the shorter to medium term, such as developing the comprehensive plan around the enterprise asset management system and workflow process management system, and also reviewing and updating overhead operations, asset inventory, and job plans and activity tasks to make sure they're up to date and Maximo. And then, of course, in the longer term, prior to the go-live implementation, making sure that staff are fully trained and that the user's needs are met. And then with the go-live, developing and implementing a process using Maximo to track the real-time status of work orders and including data analytics as part of that. Next slide, please. So thank you again to TTC management and staff. This concludes our presentation, and I believe they now have a short presentation, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Auditor General. Fort, over to you.
All right, thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Fort Monaco, and along with the head of streetcar infrastructure, Peter Horvatz, who's joining us online. Just like to take a few minutes today just to speak to some of the things that the overhead section has undertaken to modernize its business practices in an attempt to increase the overall reliability of the overhead infrastructure, along with the aim of basically improving the customer experience. Again, I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to the Attorney General's team for their hard work and dedication to the streetcar overhead operations and what I believe was a very comprehensive audit of our operations. I feel it's safe to say that the recommendation put forth by this team have affirmed that the path that the overhead group has actually commenced over the past several years is in fact the right one. Next slide, please. So this quick presentation aims to just outline to the IARMC how the overhead section has completely revamped its asset database as we've evolved from a pole-based hardware system into a Panto-based hardware system, and how we strive to align our practices and technologies with industry best practices throughout the asset database transition. Next slide, please. The overhead journey really began several years ago when we ordered the new streetcar. They're called the low-floor light rail vehicles. Those were ordered in 2009, and the first revenue launched in 2014. The new low-floor vehicles offer some of the following enhancements. The cars are completely accessible for our customers. They actually have air conditioning, so they become a lot more comfortable throughout the warm summer months. They provide boarding at all doors. And we've gotten away from the annoying trolley pole dewirements. If you all remember taking the old LRVs or CLRVs, the poles were actually quite a common thing that did require the operator to step out of the vehicle and literally physically put the pole back onto the wire. So the new vehicles, though, have required that the TTC transition to a trolley pole-based catenary system, and some of the features of such as above. And we've evolved to a pantograph overhead system, or OCS, as we normally like to call it. And as a result, the overhead asset database has been in a constant state of flux as we've converted to this industry standard pantograph system. So the above images just really demonstrate the transition of what the pole to hybrid to pantograph looks like. And I will say that we have transitioned very aggressively over the last 3 to 5 years. So why is this transition necessary? So upon ordering the low-floor vehicles, a decision was made to attempt to offer the flexibility to operate in both pole and pantograph at all times, which really created the advent of the hybrid technology. The hybrid technology basically was meant to be temporary, but allowed for us to utilize both the pantograph and a pole-based hardware to give the operations the flexibility that it required. But I'm happy to report that as of May of 2023, the overhead section's hard work has allowed every single streetcar now to operate entirely on pantograph, meaning that we have no more pole-based routes at all. The network still does have about 30 to 35% of its assets in the hybrid type that will require to be removed over the coming years and converted exclusively to a pantograph. And so I will openly acknowledge and admit that the refresh and update of our asset database is a work in progress. Next slide, please. So another significant impact or ongoing work was establishment of a cross-functional multidisciplinary team that includes overhead, transit control, and streetcar transportation divisions in 2021, when upon the advent of the pantograph technology and deployment, we did notice a rather significant operational problem involving ADDs. And for those who don't know what an ADD is, it really stands for an accidental drop down or a panto drop. This leads to rather disruptive delays. It is a feature that is welcome, but it does basically allow the pantograph shoe or the head to drop, and it cannot be raised again. And when you have an ADD, you actually require a tow. So contributing factors of these can come from third-party damage to the OCS, vehicle deficiencies, or actual operator error. As a result, we developed this collaborative team to basically work on the root cause analysis. As I mentioned, ADDs lead to very disruptive service incidents as they require the incident car to be put into service, to be put out of service, needing to be towed back to the yard, with service only resuming once the overhead infrastructure has been inspected and cleared by the emergency and overhead crew. As the chart demonstrates, as you'll notice, this team has been instrumental in addressing and reducing ADDs. We've reduced the incidents by about 25% over the past 2 years. As noted in the AG report and our management action plan, the intention now is to extend this cross-functional team to any and all streetcar track switch incidents, given the number of incidents that we currently have impacts on our service. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, our streetcars have come a long way, and as part of our journey, our asset database has had basically seen a complete revamp. The database revamp has allowed us to review our business practices proactively, and here are some of the actions that we've commenced over the last 2 to 3 years. In 2020, we onboarded a consultant asset management specialist to work with the former I&E team, the former infrastructure and engineering team, which also included the overhead section, to enhance our asset management knowledge, identify our asset management champions, and highlight our gaps via self-assessment, along with a high-level review of the future of our maximal technology. This work has now been assumed by the enterprise as we've hired a head of a TTC EAM program. As part of this, though, we did recently add dedicated asset management planners into each of our divisions, along with overhead-specific engineering technologist positions to leverage available technologies, work collaboratively with external agents and industry partners, and continued enhancement of our asset management practices. As we transition from hybrid to pantograph hardware, the TTC hired an external consultant to commence the development of a pantograph asset management or maintenance manual containing standards and best practices. This involves ongoing discussions with peers and industry technical committees. As mentioned in the AG report, the TTC is reviewing the current draft maintenance standard for full implementation in the coming years. Once TTC asset performance and reliability details are finalized on our Panto hardware within the current climate as asset performance history is developed. Next slide, please. The ONI division of the TTC is attempting to evolve our practices so we develop a proactive mindset to maintenance rather than a reactive mindset. In keeping this proactive mindset in mind, the overhead has actively commenced trialing automated inspection and real-time monitoring devices. Moving to a fully pantograph system allows us the opportunity to take advantage of new technologies that had not been previously available. Specifically, the use of automated inspection technologies and real-time health monitoring will allow us to create better defined maintenance schedules, as well as to predict end-of-life replacement cycles based on a more granular factual asset condition assessment. It can also quickly identify any system issues such as twisted, worn, or misaligned trolley wire. The system was piloted earlier this fall and was used to enhance the commissioning activities for the OCS recently on the Queensway and Lakeshore from Roncesvalles to Long Branch Loop, where the technology identified a twisted wire as part of the commissioning process, allowing us the opportunity to address the issue proactively, that is, before any actual failure occurred, rather than relying on traditional visual inspection process. The technology found the fault before we were able to get to it, and we were able to address the issue immediately before we had any sort of failure. Next slide. Lastly, I would like to delve into the core of our commitment to excellence, which is our active involvement in standards and benchmarking committees. This engagement extends across prominent organizations such as the IEEE, GOAL, BOLTS, APTA, NRC, TRAX, and UITP via participation in all these conferences as committees. Active participation in committees has directly contributed to ongoing safety improvements for our workforce, including the implementation of arc flash clothing, tailored overhead training programs for our apprentices and qualified line persons, and direct input into OSHA standards and Ministry of Labor guidelines. Our active involvement in these committees has led us to modernize information gathering through platforms like Google Docs, which not only streamline data collection, but also enhances collaboration and accessibility to information across the entire organization. To stay at the forefront of the industry standards, our participation in benchmarking committees has driven the adoption of automated inspection technologies, allowing us to work on improving the accuracy and efficiency of our inspections with the aim to increase overall reliability and safety of our operations. We have also commenced integrating geographical information systems or GIS mapping into our operations as a direct result of our participation in the aforementioned standards committee. This mapping aligns seamlessly with our Maximo asset management system and is integrated with Google Maps, allowing us to enhance our ability to manage and maintain assets more effectively. The active involvement in standards and benchmarking committees has far-reaching benefits, from enhancing safety measures for our workforce to embracing modern technology and ensuring the accuracy of inspections. These initiatives will underscore our commitment to excellence and continuous improvement, all things that we all are well underway. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we thank the AG again for their great work and will act on their recommendations, while also utilizing their work as a confirmation that the TTC Overhead Group is well on its way to improving its overall asset reliability, along with modernizing its business. We started, but we also acknowledge there's still much more left to do. So again, as witnessed over the past 3 to 4 years, the Overhead Group has, in the midst of a complete overhaul of its asset database, with some very positive results on the ADD failure side to cross-collaboration across many departments. We have proactively created and onboarded key positions that will enhance our business practices and asset management skill set, as an enterprise AM approach and strategy is ongoing. These positions are going to be key in addressing a lot of the short-term issues that have been identified by the AG's office. We're committed to continuing to invest in key technologies to develop that proactive rather than a reactive mindset to asset management, and couple and basically allow the technology to drive our business processes. We continue and will continue to sit on and participate with several committees to ensure alignment with industry best practices. We aim to be the leader in many of those committees, so I believe the work is underway. So that concludes my short presentation to the ARMC. Thank you for your attention. Myself and Peter are happy to take questions on anything presented here or anything involved with the asset or the management response action plan.
Thank you very much, Bart. That's very helpful. Let's open questions. Julie, yes, go ahead.
Just so.
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Got to work out more. Thank you, everybody. Our meetings are usually lonely affairs, and it's so nice to have so many people here. We have deputants, staff, and most particularly the AG. We really, and your staff, we really appreciate the work you've done. And in fact, I love getting these reports because they're just so helpful. And, you know, it's an outside set of eyes. It sounds like staff is, you know, taking this in the spirit that it's been intended. So before I ask my one question, I just thank you for the work that you've done. It seemed to me when I was reading this that a lot of the underlying issues could be solved by the correct usage of Maximo. And I'm wondering, you did mention actually in your comments that some of these things, and in particular the technology, getting the technology appropriately programmed and ready and training on and all that. I just wondered about if you were in agreement with the timing on that. It seems like it's taking a long time and it solves so many of the problems. Is that just the complicated nature of the beast, or do you think that we could maybe accelerate that?
Thank you very much. So through the chair, that's why I actually had those 2 slides at the end of our presentation. So I do think that the use of technology will help to solve a lot of the issues in terms of making sure the record keeping is accurate and that the job plan is in there and you know, everything's accurate and complete. However, at the same time, there are some recommendations that are outside of that technology in terms of having a clear manual, policies and procedures, so that, and providing a proper level of oversight to staff so that there's consistency in the work that they're performing and documenting. So I believe that that's really critical as well. And then just strengthening the process as well. So that's, although technology can be part of that, is changing the processes also outside of technology too. So those items on the first slide that I walked through are some of the areas outside of technology that can be implemented prior to the system being updated.
Fort, maybe you can respond as well to the timing issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there's some low-hanging fruits in this entire thing. So just to be clear, Overhead has had a version of Maximo operating since the mid-2000s, but the Maximo system itself has been used primarily as a work order clearing system. But what makes things a little more challenging for us, if you got your Maximo has got your assets in it, our schedules are run by an Excel sheet and our technicians fill out a piece of paper. So you can see there's some opportunities there. We think we can take the Excel stuff and basically be driven and include that into Maximal. So that drives the inspections. So it becomes a little less manual. We're still got some challenges as it pertains to still having the paperwork filled out, but we are looking at how we can make the technology so that we can standardize the form and utilize technology, even in the short term, to kind of create drop-down values so that an NA is an NA for everybody and everyone understands what an NA means. But as the Auditor General found, you know, some people say NA, some people leave it blank. Some people say it's very worn. Other people's will tell you it's a 6 millimeter worn. So I think that'll be a long way. That'll go a long way. So I do agree. There's some low hanging fruits that we can do until we wait for the Maximal EAM program to come in.
Yeah.
Benton, any questions? No. I had a couple of questions, probably for you, Fort. First of all, the ADDs. We've struggled with on-time performance in our streetcar network, and I'm wondering, are ADDs a significant part of that, or is that more of a minor explanation of on-time performance issues?
So I would say, Commissioner, it's become a little less major. So it has become, without having the stats in front of us, I think that a lot of the on-time performance is really driven by the congestion of the city.
That's what I would have thought.
But, you know, ultimately, we always focus on what we can control. And for us, the overhead group as a whole is committed to making that asset last as long as it can and to replace that asset before it fails. So the intention is, even though we think it forms a minor piece of the overall on-time performance, but if the assets can knock it out of the park, that'll just make for a better on-time performance.
You know, I'd be interested in seeing any kind of stats that we can put together on that as to when we look at our on-time performance on streetcars, if we could break down the causes for not meeting on-time performance and understand, as you say, what can we control out of that? Because we understand there's a bunch we can't control, but you know, we just have to focus on the things we can.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide that.
So following up on that, have you figured out what the biggest causes of those ADDs are?
So I think that it's been a combination of things, but I would think that two things. I think particularly when we were in the transition phase between hybrid pole and Panto, we found operator error to be a concern, particularly as we started with brand new employees. But one of the things we also did, we utilized technology. So we put what we call automatic trippers. So the idea would be at 4 or 5 of our hotspots in 2022, I believe we put these automatic trippers so that the folks would basically cut the traction power on the streetcar off so that you did an ADD. And so ultimately, it was a matter of doing a reset because of the fact that the entire network was in a bit of a transition, pole, hybrid, pantograph. So I think a lot of those issues have gone away, but I will say I think it's important to continue on this journey because operators come and go, and as new operators come on, you just need to make sure that, you know, especially as we go through this state of flux, if you will, that it is important that they're fully cognizant of where they're going and where they're not going. So I think that's been a part of it. We want to do the same thing, like I mentioned, on the switches as well, because we find that, you know, operator error sometimes is an issue with the switches. And again, same type of thing. You get new operators coming in all the time, so just to make sure we have to stay on top of this.
The other question I had is I wasn't sure I understood your comments on the composition of our asset base.
Yes.
Did you say like a third or 35% are still non-pantograph?
Right. So what we have basically in a nutshell, we probably have about 70% of our asset database is Panto only, and then 30% to 35% of our asset database is hybrid. So if you can picture hybrid, it allows you to run both pole and Panto. So it's basically two systems in one. The pole system, and over top of it or alongside of it is the Panto system. So 30 to 35% of our system is still on hybrid.
But we don't have any streetcars left that have
Right.
poles.
No.
Do we have buses that have poles?
No.
We have no
Those were
poles.
retired. We have no poles at all.
Okay.
With
So our actual fleet is poleless, but our database is not yet.
Right, because the database still reflects the assets that are there that will allow for poles to run. That's not to say that the poles are off the streetcars. The poles are still on the streetcars, and there's still the opportunity for folks to run a pole in a yard if need be, or if absolutely need to, can still run a pole as long as you're running on hybrid. But you cannot run a pole in a Panto hardware, it won't work.
Right, okay. So is the plan to get rid of
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, so the idea now is to go back and start slowly but surely stripping out the hybrid hardware and make it entirely accessible but as of May this year, you shouldn't, unless there's a major problem, you shouldn't see any vehicles.
poles out on the street.
Correct.
Through the chair, just to make, just be clear. So on the vehicles, we have no intention to take the poles off. We're going to lock them down because they do come in handy in an emergency that if you need to get temporary power to the vehicle and you can't use the pantograph, it is handy. But once the entire network is pantograph, we plan to lock it down to the vehicle, and maybe only maintenance people have the key to unlock it to put it back up.
But we're very anxious to remove that hybrid because it's just extra.
Complicates
It's
life.
complicated and it's very maintenance heavy to go out and inspect assets that you want functional, but you generally don't use.
Yeah, okay. Last question, staff resources. So the deputant actually raised this issue a little bit. What does it look like in your shop, Fort? Do you have a lot of open positions? Are you having any difficulty recruiting the kind of people you need?
It's gotten better, Chair. It's still a bit of a challenge because of the nature of the overhead work. So my background is with the QP Local 2 union. So the overhead is part of that union. That's usually always been looked at and still is looked at as a bit of an entrance position. This is how a lot of people get into the TTC through this particular group. We do lock them in with 4-year apprenticeship along with a 4-year by the CBA that they have to serve as a qualified person. But some folks, just because of the nature of the work, it's outside, it's dirty, it's a lot of live line work, it's a lot of night shifts and so forth. There is still a bit of a turnover. I think we've come a long way. We were once double digits in terms of vacancies. We're down to single digits, but the deputant is right. It is a posting that is consistently up just because of the turnover, albeit the turnover's gotten a lot better with the fact that we've got that lock-in period.
And is most of the turnover that you experience internal turnover, like people leaving to go to another part of the TTC?
With the unionized, yeah, Chair, I would say for the most part, folks will, so an overhead apprentice, for example, will come in, they have a 207S license, but it's not really a license recognized. It's not a red seal license. A lot of folks will jump to electrical because they will get that 309A, which is a red seal license. So that's an attractive offer for people.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I had no other questions. So I think our job here, committee, is to recommend to the board that they approve the recommendations of the AG. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend that. Thank you. And we're all in favor of that? That's approved. Okay, the next item we're going to is the AG's cybersecurity audit. And I think we can introduce this item in the public forum, but then we're going to go in camera to review some of the detailed findings. So Madam AG, I'll let you introduce it and then we'll go in camera after that.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Chair Lalonde. So I'd like to introduce and thank my team: Syed Ali, Assistant Auditor General; Gawa Mark, Audit Director; Andrew Krupovich, Senior Audit Manager; and Atif Karwa, Auditor. I'd also like to thank the management and staff of TTC who helped us with our audit. We had support from many TTC staff, and a few that we worked most closely with were Duction and his team Amberina, Michael Smith, and Norbert Coote. So thank you very much to them. So as you mentioned, I have some brief comments in the public forum, and then we have a presentation that's confidential for when we move into camera.
Okay.
So my office acknowledges the importance of cybersecurity and has performed several cybersecurity audits at the city and its agencies and corporations since 2015. Our cybersecurity audits have included overall cybersecurity and select critical systems at the city and its agencies, including Toronto Water SCADA system, Toronto Fire Services, Toronto Police Service, and of course, our 2 audits of the Toronto Transit Commission. The TTC delivers critical transit services that Toronto needs to function as a large city. This cybersecurity audit will help the TTC to ensure that the supporting technology infrastructure has a high degree of reliability and to help protect the agency in the event of a cyber attack. My work plans will continue to include cybersecurity audits, given the significance of this risk and the impact cyber incidents can have on organizations. Due to the sensitivity of the information identified in these audits, our cybersecurity reports have been confidential. And so I'm now ready to provide that presentation, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Auditor General. I'm proposing that we move in camera for two items, the cybersecurity audit as introduced by the Auditor General, and then we also have a training session on enterprise risk management for committee members. Our plan will be to return into the public session at the conclusion of those two in-camera items and approve any motions made in camera. But with that, I will ask the Chris Ann to move us in camera.
Just approve.
So we're looking for a motion to move in camera. Fenton moves that. That is approved. Okay.
Watch your mics.
Information you have a printout is also there.
Okay, great. All right, I'll use the electronic.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. You're the most,
Keen to know what is on that axis, and I couldn't see what we were getting.
I gotta tell you, you're the most polite board person I have dealt with in 20 years. I wouldn't have started a meeting with hearing that, hey, I can't read that.
Yeah.
It's a great room if you're in the right spot around these screens.
Yeah, actually,
I think
I
next
had
time we
a,
spread ourselves out a
I had a Okay, we're back.
Test 1, 2, test. Janelle confirming audio.
I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so I'm entertaining a motion to approve the recommendations of the Auditor General to be, that we're recommending them to the full board for implementation. Julie has made that motion and that is approved. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Just receipt of the training session.
Okay, move receipt of the training session. Fenton will do that. That's approved. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Julie will do that, and we are unanimous. So we are adjourned.
Thank you, member.
Thank you, everybody.